hypocrites. Let's continue our conversation with Alan Dershowitz, the noted defense attorney. Alan, again, thank you for the time.
Sure.
Dick Cheney's angry. He said the way we got the information was done to protect the United States. You set the post 9/11 scene in the previous segment pretty well. Why the argument that so many are making about those who are terrorists, not from a traditional nation state, not from signatories to Geneva Conventions or other rules of war internationally, receiving the virtual protection of the U.S. Constitution and protection for citizens, usually reserved for citizens?
Well, people will first of all be shocked to hear this, but the United States Constitution does not prohibit torture. The United States Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision about 10 years ago, ruled that the Fifth Amendment only prohibits the use of evidence obtained by torture from being introduced in a criminal trial, but it doesn't, the Fifth Amendment at least, doesn't prohibit torture itself. And so we've had many cases in the United States where the police have used torture to elicit confessions, or in one case in Florida, to find the whereabouts of a kidnap victim. And the courts have approved that use of torture. Of course, we have a statute now on the books, I think passed in 1994, that does prohibit the use of torture, but it's not a constitutional rule. Does it apply to non-citizens? No. There we have to look at Geneva Conventions and international accords that we're signed onto that prohibit the use of torture. And of course, the Bush administration said that waterboarding isn't torture. It is torture. There's no doubt that it is. It's designed to elicit fear of drowning. It could produce drowning. And I think we should call it what it is, which is torture. The question that I think most Americans would have different answers on is if we had a ticking bomb situation and we only had 3 or 4 hours to locate the bomb, and we had a person in custody who knew where the bomb was, would we torture him to make him take us to the bomb? Now, you don't believe anything under torture, but if he takes you to the bomb, as happened in the Philippines some years ago where somebody was tortured into showing where bombs were hidden that were going to be used to blow up airplanes, that's a self-proving use of torture. And I think Americans would disagree fundamentally about whether torture should be used in those situations. I bet a majority would say it should be.
Well, let's talk about, you're a big friend of Israel. Israel has to deal with the realities of a hostile situation daily. Do the Israelis utilize waterboarding? What do they use in terms of enhanced interrogation techniques?
Well, mostly they use the long-term interrogation techniques. But, of course, in some situations, they have resorted to torture. And the Supreme Court of Israel outlawed the use of torture and in a footnote said, if you ever did have a real ticking bomb situation and if an intelligence agent used torture, then maybe he could raise the defense of necessity, that it had to be done, and maybe he'd be excused. They left it open and vague. The Senate did cite that opinion in its report, but Israel today, at least under law, does not use torture.
Less than 2 minutes remain. Our parent website, Newsmax.com, has this interesting headline, we'll have it on the screen in a minute, saying that President Obama is working hard to clear out Guantanamo Bay, with a dozen prisoners released since Thanksgiving. Alan, is this the right decision?
It's, again, a very hard question. What do you do with people who you can't convict of crime because the evidence against them comes from undercover agents whose cover we don't want to blow, but who have admitted and acknowledged that they will go out and do it again? Should we have some form of preventive detention? That's a very hard question. And I noticed that the Obama administration is not planning to release all these people, perhaps to move them to supermaxes or to give them to other countries. But how you deal with the people who are extraordinarily dangerous, self-admitted terrorists, who you can't convict of crimes, is a very difficult question. What we need is nuance in considering this, not the kind of yes or no that the Senate report came up with. We need a little bit of balance, a recognition that there are arguments on both sides of these issues.
And there are questions that continue. For example, the use of enhanced interrogation techniques as opposed to the use of drones, how you effectively fight a war against a non-nation state and stay true to your principles and also respect international law. Questions that we hope to talk about more as our time continues together. Unfortunately, right now, Alan Dershowitz, this particular segment is done. You heard what our good friend Mr. Dershowitz had to say. He calls waterboarding torture. But he also points out that the Constitution does not specifically prohibit that kind of endeavor. What's your take on it? Why don't you tweet me at NewsmaxTV, #America's Forum.